But one of my biggest challenges sitting in a small team within a huge organisation is changing that culture. And I think one of the things I wanted to throw out there as well is that you know, it's great that we can get to a place that we have that common ground, but how also do we prove kind of the investment in our teams, like the community investment teams, to the wider kind of sector within, or the wider organisation as well. So anyone that's kind of overcome those barriers and changed that culture, I'd be really interested to hear how you did it.
Well, I think that's, I mean, that is an important question, because comes back to the so what was asked before, because obviously people here, I think, generally are convinced of the importance of the kinds of things which you're all doing, and we are all doing. We're trying to find ways of assessing that and measuring outcomes and showing the value of that and improving our practice. As you say, most of the people here also sit within bigger organisations, have all sorts of other different priorities and different objectives. I mean, I think it's quite an interesting question to put to people here. To what extent does the kind of activity we're talking about here, you know, is it actually now embedded, or is it still very often just a bolt-on or a sideline? I mean, I think you were saying that, I think you were suggesting that Gentoo see this as integral. But is that
within one of the subsidiaries? Yes. It's absolutely embedded within my subsidiary, or within other parts of the group. They would measure success largely through profit and loss, if it's in a construction arm, for example. And part of it's that discussion we had earlier about are we going to measure the social impact on every part of the group? And there's still a long way for us to go. We felt it was important that we measured outcomes, because how else do we measure the success of the social programmes that we do? Whereas my colleagues, whose job is to effectively generate a profit by house building, they are measured by how much money we built this year. Where we need to get to is that they can demonstrate the social value from that, as well as the financial value that they create. So by no means embedded at all. Within part of the group, yes, but not across the board.
Does anybody else want to add to that?
Part of that model, though, is about looking at a development programme or a development framework. For example, when they're procuring, we're starting to talk the language of the individuals that are doing that bit of work, because if you talk to them in the language that we're talking around this table, they might not really be turned on by it. But if you talk to them about procurement and how we could help them with the procurement and meet the needs of the employment and training strands or something like that, and that will tick the boxes of the HCA, then all of a sudden they're really interested. So I think it's sometimes about changing the message depending on who is listening to it. So if it's corporate social responsibility group, they'll want to be talked to about carbon savings. If we want to get our housing officers to do affordable warmth work, we don't talk about carbon savings at all. We talk about the benefit to the tenant and saving money on the heating, and then potentially paying the rent more easily and having a better life in the home. So I think a lot of it is about changing the message. You're still seeking to achieve the same thing, but just switching the message depending on who it is you're talking to, which makes you a bit schizophrenic, but you know, we'll get through it all.
Does that resonate with people here, other people here?
Just in terms of embedding it, and we might be going too far with this, but we're really trying to get to grips with what is social impact and measuring. We asked all our teams, including sort of backroom teams, like IT, HR, to look at what's your social impact. And look at like the website, I don't know what is social impact. But it was a beneficial exercise to go into the social impact assessment with the teams, and it looked at, even if it's once removed, so I'm doing my IT podcast, but at the end of the phone there might be somebody's working with tenants, working through that. But we also have to think about how could you have a direct those social impacts. So we asked all the teams, you consider having a resident volunteer in your HR team, or IT, maybe an HR IT team, or if you, again using the IT example, you consider going out and doing training or helping with residents' computers to try and make the whole organisation sort of get an idea of some about social impact idea. And we'll see if it pans out. We've asked every team to come up with a social impact added value project that directly relates to tenants, and that includes sort of development, maintenance, technology practices, trying to spread that across the organisation, rather than just being supported housing or just being housing officers. So we'll see how it goes. That's kind of our plan for next year.
Does anyone want to add to that? Or
Well, I was going to connect that all three actually there. I mean, that is interesting because we're officially embedded, but I still come across HR managers, IT managers, who still talk about the core business and still think principles and even though they're visual enough, like Gen 2 has it as sort of embedded. I was picking up on what was being said at Contour and then by you, but where does the sort of an economic theory, you have sort of trickle-down theory, where does the impact stop? Because we run a lot of place schemes and we get volunteers trained, and then you see the impact on that volunteer because they're perhaps going from doing nothing to gaining confidence. And then, you know, music is quite an outlet. And we've been funding an organisation to run rock schools, and I was talking to them the other day, and one of the people in the first group are now appearing in front of live audiences and attract another band member. So there is a real sort of trickle down on impact, so you'll never get an assessment tool unless you've run it for years that really picks up the true impact. But you've got to articulate that, even if it's just in obviously words, rather than try and measure it. Otherwise, you only consider what can be measured and forget about the quantitative surround of the noise around that.
You want to pick up on that? Yeah.
The effects that we had when we started to measure the outcomes of individual residents were them or ones that went back into mainstream society, but then the ones that couldn't go back to work or education, and looked at ways of how we could, they had skills that could be beneficial to the community, set them up within the community. So there's an avenue for every resident to be able to be back engaged within the community or society, and then the communities then started to develop their own projects, and then it then started to become a community enterprise. So this went from isolated estate with no shop, etc. And it snowballed, and you know it's becoming now where it's a training centre where we will train other residents. So it's not going to stop, and we don't want it to stop. What we do want, obviously, is to use a model where we can replicate it, and so it's never going to stop. We don't want it to stop.
Never.
Too many people out there.
Right.
I suppose the question that then springs to my mind is, do you need to continually measure? If you, and again, it goes back to Elizabeth's point about, so what is it that you want then? What is it that you're trying to achieve? And if once you've achieved it, then presumably you stop measuring it and move on to deliver it to other people.
Well, the community projects that we've supported to establish throughout the 3 years of our life, it's been about 4 to 5 projects that's been developed from this original project. They will then use the same resident tracking system. So it's not all going on our system. They will we teach them how to use and collect information and put it through the resident tracking system, which records every single transition of an individual on the estate, but more importantly, the ones that aren't engaging. So they would use the same tracking system.
And did Contour provide that to you, or is that something did you say you formulated?
No, that's the one I had made specifically for our project for the community, which is obviously it was a brand new innovative that you had to get backing for, etc. So it was one that I had to prove that worked, and over an 18-month period started to prove that it worked, and then obviously 3 years on it's looking at, particularly because it's been a mass preventative model, specifically after the riots, you know, the estates that we looked at didn't riot, and people want to know why. It has been proved to be a very good preventative model. But no, it wasn't something that Contour gave us. However, we do link our outcomes into Contour from our tracking system.
The whole idea of measuring the impact across the whole of Gen 2 keeps me awake at night, I'm quite honest. What I've described there is our measurement of the outcomes of one particular part of the group. Which, to be fair, comprised of a range of quite distinct programs. We are having discussions within the group about how we apply the outcome methodology to the other parts of the business around neighbourhood management, around house building. what do we know? How do we know what the social return of our house building programme is? It's really important, I think, that we start to try and grasp those. Really interested in having Elizabeth's presentation as well, because what we've tried to look at in the group, similar to the work we did around the neighbourhood assessment, was moving that away from simply about the physical environment and properties, looking at it as a kind of community assessment model. So in the same way that Elizabeth described the 7 principles, we've looked at, so what does make up a successful community then? Yes, it's partly property, yes, it's partly environment, but it is about people being able to influence decisions. We're doing some work, tentatively at the minute, around mapping what the group currently does against those issues. And I think the next stage is that you could potentially then outcome that. So of all of that work that we're doing, we've done it in a kind of a wheel format, so the 7 principles will form the inner segment of the wheel. We map what we're doing around it in the next segment. Difficult to describe visually. But then we really think there's merit in looking at what are the outcomes of those activities across the whole of the group. But it is a big exercise, Terry.
Can I do a follow-up? Obviously you work with different funders. Have you found it difficult to integrate, and again this goes back to some discussions earlier on, there isn't one universal measurement to try and, because I don't know, supporting people may ask you to measure the impact in this way, big lottery asks you to do it in a different way. Has that been an issue for you and other organisations? I mean, there's so many different funders, they're probably all, some may ask you to do no measurements, some may ask you to fill out so many forms, you may as well employ someone to do the forms. Has that been an issue for you or any other people?
Yeah, it has been for us. Obviously, you look at the requirements of the funder in terms of what you need to measure, and it does mean that you have to change your procedures slightly to do that, but it has to be done. The reason that we're doing a social return on investment of our older person service at the minute is to demonstrate to the City Council the added value that our services bring. And interestingly, the council is there changing the way that they're procuring the support and people contracts, are moving towards an outcomes focus as well. And I suppose the issue for us is, do our outcomes compare with the council's outcomes? And if they don't, how are we going to manage all of that? So I think perhaps one of the goals of this type of group could be, can we establish a set of shared outcomes rather than us each having our own separate that we're trying to measure? And at least then you start to get, you like to think you get some form of consistency across what we do.
Yeah, and that's what we'd be really interested in doing. I mean, I spent 10 minutes telling you why we're not doing it, but it's actually, we want to stay engaged with the conversations because we really want to do it.
Yeah.
We just want to put some focused effort in and get the right return on it. And I think that is not doing it on your own. I think it's doing it in a consensual way.